Hey guys, Henning and Morten from FlippedNormals here, and in this video we are going to be looking into how you can improve your dragon sculpt. This was a character artist who sent it over to me, Lauren Beiser, and she just asked for some quick feedback on a model, and I figured this is a really good model to actually do some cool sculpting over. The original stuff here is pretty awesome. There were just some things which I would just like to refine a bit.
Yeah, this is kind of back to the series that we've done a couple of times before, and people have been requesting to do more of these sculpt overs, so we thought, why not? We have a dragon, so...
Yeah, you can't really get cooler than that. The first thing I would say when it comes to the sculpt, there are some anatomical things here and there, but it looks like there's not a whole lot of reference use for different parts. So the first thing I'm starting off with is just getting reference for things. For the face here, I'm using a crocodile. So it looks like Lauren has been looking at snakes for this. Like there are some evidence of this based on the tongue and the mouth and maybe the nose as well. But I'm switching this more over to crocodile just because I know, and that's a really cool reference.
Yeah, I mean it's like whenever you're doing any sort of creatures like these, reference is just it's key. Yeah. Because otherwise you'll start to make up anatomy that just doesn't exist. Yeah. I mean, obviously it's a dragon, so it doesn't exist, but whatever. It's like you can't base it off of what you think anatomy will look like, because it has to be grounded in something, otherwise it looks a little bit off. And
also, nature has already done all the designing for you. There is no reason to design anything from scratch here. If you want to do a dragon, maybe you start off with the proportions of I don't know, maybe a lion, and then you mix some Komodo dragon into it, and then you put a snake head, and then you introduce some crocodile things. Like you really don't have to invent anything because nature has done the job for you.
It's like what we talked about in a Q&A video about doing concept art. It's like you can do your own concept art from scratch, but it's never going to be as good as someone who does only concept art. It's the same with the anatomy and nature. Like Henning says, nature has done the work for you, so make sure to use it.
Yeah, and 60 million years of evolution is pretty functional.
Yeah, good. That's pretty good.
I'm using a goat horn for reference for the horns as well, and just trying to integrate the horns more into it because it looks like they were just a bit on top.
Yeah, right now they're kind of there's no structure around the horns.
No,
horns like these, especially the ones that are so close to the bone, you would kind of almost assume that they grow out of the skull, like they're connected to the skull somehow.
Yeah, exactly. You can look at like deers and all these like animals with antlers for actually seeing a really awesome connection points. You might not see it as much with goats because they have more fur going along or fur growing over the horns, but the goats are still really awesome for reference for the horns themselves. They have some crazy stuff going on there. One thing I thought about as well when sculpting this was that the face looked a bit weak. And I don't mean design-wise, I just mean purely in like, if it were to bite something, I think it would actually break parts of its face. So one of the first things I did was straight up just introducing more thickness to it, removing some of the fragility to it, and just really adding more mass to it.
Yeah, the lips were quite thin and everything around the jaw.
Yeah, exactly. It was kind of like it had teeth in its skull, but they weren't really teeth. They were just kind of like edgy things there, which I don't really think worked that well. So I'm just going straight up for like a simpler and more crocodile design.
Yeah, and like the way that Lauren's done it here with having the lips and the outside of the face be one subtool and then the inside being a second subtool, I think it's a easier way to handle this. Like technically, yeah, everything kind of flows into one. But if you have it separated out as subtools, it's a lot easier to work with the gums and keep it separated from the lips.
It really is. This is one of the main things I see in a lot of sculpts is like the sternocleidomastoid. It's really just get that in there. It's one of these which you just need it to turn your head.
It's the power muscle.
It's really the power muscle. And, the bigger the head is, or, the bigger you want this muscle to be, because there's a lot of power here to actually turn it. I'm also trying to think of like it's a dragon, so it can definitely breathe fire because, it's a dragon. So I'm trying to think of like this like pouch between its, between like under its neck, kind of like the fat deposit. I'm kind of thinking like maybe there is some fire stuff going on there.
Fire pouch.
Yeah, fire pouch.
They're kind of like, I think a Komodo dragon would probably be a good reference for that, because they have that like super loose skin right underneath their neck.
Yeah.
You could argue that maybe that was a fire thing or something.
Also, just going over the deltoids here. Before doing deltoids, I went over and did added more defined clavicles, because everything is kind of attached there. This is a bit tricky area to get right, and I'm struggling a little bit. But what I do whenever I'm struggling is get in the scapula. If you get the scapula and the clavicles in there, then this area is not resolving itself because it's still tricky. But if you don't have it, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, it's like the connection point from the clavicle back to the scapula is always tricky. And especially when you're sculpting something that's kind of in a pose that's not neutral, then you kind of have to figure out, okay, how would the clavicle have moved into that position?
Yeah, exactly. I also found that the insertion point for the pecs were a bit too close to the center of the body. I would like them more like further down the humerus, because you can't really get too much power with this. The further down it is, the more power you can get.
Yeah, the insertion point for the pecs isn't up by the delts. It's right down at the bottom of the delt, right on the humerus there. So you can actually feel it if you like feel on your humerus yourself. There's like a tiny notch where everything kind of connects.
Now all the people watching are just touching their arms. So whenever I'm doing this, I'm not really too focused on what's already there. If something isn't working, I will just go over and remove it. Yeah. Just sculpt over it and be merciless.
That's the hard part when it's your own sculpt. It's like maybe you've put in a lot of hours, and then either you realize yourself or someone gives you feedback or something, and you're like, you figure out, oh, okay, I need to actually change this. Going over and removing a lot of the detail, that can be really excruciating. But it's also why it's important to get it right the first time, just because then, all the details that you have, it's going to be fine.
Also, the first thing, this is something we keep talking about all the time, but one of the first things you got to do is you got to get your skeleton right. If your skeleton isn't right from the beginning, then nothing is going to work.
Yeah.
Then this is going to be like a floating sack of meat with undefined things. It's going to be like minced meat with skin on top.
Well, you can see, turning on and off the layer there, is that the insertion point, especially for the pecs there, how much it's actually moved, but it looks a lot better now. And that's the thing about this sculpt. It's like, it's not that there was a lot of stuff where it's like, okay, this is bad or this is completely wrong. It's more of this is a solid sculpt that just needs to be nudged in the right direction.
Exactly. One of the things which it does need, which it doesn't really have, is when this is something like a lot of people they don't think about, is skin. People just assume that, you have muscle and then you have nothing.
Yeah.
So on top of everything, we're going to do a skin pass later on, like actually do sculpting, like trying to get some nice folds in there, and just kind of, it's not that you're smoothing out the muscles, but you just need skin on top.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially for, let's call it a lizard with wings. Like, again, if you take a look at a Komodo dragon, for example, like the amount of loose skin and skin detail that they have is incredible.
Yeah.
So they're really cool. Good reference for something like that.
And it's called a dragon.
Yeah.
We're going to get in trouble for this, though, because we're calling it a dragon, because I think it's a wyvern.
How do you pronounce it? Not that again.
Yeah, we've had this a few times now.
Yeah.
Actually, no, it's a dragon. Shut up.
But I love this whole, coming up with fantasy things, defining it.
It's not that we're talking about, it's a lion. No, it's actually a tiger. No, it's like, no, it's a different fantasy thing, which some people have just agreed that this random thing of imagination.
So what? I don't actually remember. What's the difference between the two? Is there something about if they have wings or legs?
Yeah, exactly. Because this guy's wings is attached to his arms.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so some are. I think a dragon would be like if you have a lion and you just put some wings on it. A wyvern is. Okay,
I see. Yeah,
but it's totally a dragon.
Yeah, keep it easy.
If this were to attack your village and you were like a dragon, they would be like, actually, no. You're like, there's a flying thing from the sky coming down with fire on you.
The wyverns are attacking.
I kind of like the teeth though of this character because that's clearly inspired by snakes.
Mm. You kind of have that with the basilisk from Harry Potter.
Oh, it's so cool.
That's pretty cool as well. Obviously, that's just a big snake, but I don't know. Like big snakes just kind of tend to look like dragons a little bit.
What you got to keep in mind as well when designing something like this, which can fly, is it's got to just have some giant pecs and giant muscles on the back because it needs to just propel itself. It's like you know how if you can do a lot of push-ups, you probably have kind of a big chest. This is like if you're flying with those muscles.
And also just looking at this, I think just in terms of pure proportions, I'd probably go in for like a final design or something and just give it a bigger wingspan. Just because it's like when you look at a bird, like so much of its body is the length of the wings, and obviously it's like hollow bones and all that kind of stuff, so it can actually fly. Whereas a dragon's probably going to weigh a couple tons, and
no, probably.
So just like you have to like give it massive wings in order for it to be able to fantasy fly.
One of the few designs I've actually seen this is the dragons, not dragons, from Lord of the Rings. The one the Dark Rider is on.
The little slugs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which totally not dragons because they are.
Is that also a Wyvern?
Yeah, I think so. But it's totally a dragon. But regardless, they actually have really they have such huge wingspan.
Yeah.
But that kind of leads to a problem when it comes to like the film because if you're going to frame the shots, because you can never really frame the entire thing because it's so giant. But it just looks awesome. That's one of the coolest dragon designs I've ever seen. I think Game of Thrones is also doing an all right job there. They have like a massive wingspan.
Yes, I think there's some awesome dragons there.
They really are. For this, I was looking at crocodile eyes as well. Just really getting like the.
And do they have that extra lid thing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's really cool. It's called like a nictitating membrane, I think it is.
Yeah.
And it's like most animals have
There's
it. Like,
so many animals that have. Yeah. I think cats have it as well.
Yeah, cats have it. It's super cool because it allows you to for some animals it's transparent. So like camels have it, so they can see during like snowstorm, or like not snowstorm.
The opposite.
A sandstorm. I guess a snowstorm as well. But it allows you to have your eyes open during those areas.
But isn't it something like camels came from like a super cold climate or something? So
yeah, exactly. So one of the theories about now we're kind of going on a tangent here, but there's an animal sculpting video. One of the theories about camels is that they originate in North America, and there is a lot of evidence for that. Yeah. And the fact that they're doing well in Sahara or in deserts is because it's the skills you need to survive heat is very similar to what you need to survive in the cold. But yeah, if you're a creature artist, I recommend watching as many talks and all this kind of stuff on animals. Yeah. Because this kind of stuff matters. If you're gonna design something and you know the history of camels, like this stuff might matter to your design, or maybe not. It's not that you're gonna use that directly.
Not because a camel migrated from North America to the Sahara.
But it might that knowledge might give you more diverse knowledge of where to look for information.
Yeah, then you're like, oh, camels have feet that are this big, so they didn't fall through the snow, and that helps them in sand. Blah,
yeah,
blah,
so if you were to design something which needs to work for a snowy environment, you're not going to redesign it. You might just look for camels as a starting point. That's kind of what like the AT-ATs from Star Wars has. They have like almost camel feet.
Yeah. God, that's a silly design.
It's so stupid.
You're really building up a lot of volumes here. Just like getting, because there's a lot of areas on the face and the rest of the body that has like these really smooth areas where the surface is just like, you see there's like some kind of surface, but it's not really defined. So going in and just giving that some love can help it a lot.
Yeah, and even if you are going for a snake character, and maybe you're gonna do like a proper snake skin on top afterwards, I would still add this like underlying undulation for it. It just really helps just to make the skin read. Like I could have gone over in this character, and the only thing I would change would be like this undulation pass, the sculpting over it with clay buildup, and that would still would have improved the character because it just makes it feel a lot more natural.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it's kind of like this sporadic pass where I just have like, epilepsy in my arm almost. But it's like to build up some fat deposits and some loose skin, and then obviously go over and like refine it a little bit so it's not pure randomness. But I feel like going over with the clay buildup there really, really helps.
Yeah, it really does. I'm sculpting most of this. Like most of everything I'm sculpting is with the clay buildup. And some standard and some damn standard, but like...
But Henning, what's the secret brush you're using?
That's brush 32, and we're not showing that in the video, but that's really the best one.
It's one of those where you're like, yeah, go to our website and sign up for this course, and then sell you some dreams or something.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but like, I don't know, for me, the longer I've been doing this and the more I've been sculpting, the less and less brushes I've been using.
Yeah.
It's really, I really don't use a lot anymore. And, you know, if you're interested in that whole thing about tools and stuff, we have topics about that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, also, like, if you've been watching some of our sculpting videos and you can't really, by listening to it, you can't really tell which one it is because they sound the same. That's because sculpting is the same. Yeah. I mean, if you're doing Little Hobbit or you're doing a crazy dragon or, you know, a little mouse for an animated movie, the concepts are exactly the same.
Yeah.
You start off with big, broad shapes. You know, you get your skeleton in there, your muscle, your fat, and your skin. And this just kind of varies based on the character. You know, if you have... it's kind of like you have a slider where you make the bones really long or really long and strong, or small and shallow. Yeah. And that the difference there is between a mouse and like an elephant. And then how much muscle does it have? And how much fat does it have? Like you think about... again, a mouse versus maybe like a hippo. Like the fat deposits there is just like the other end of a slider.
Yeah.
So it really is all the same tools.
And now you can see that, you know, there's a lot of skin that's been added on top. Before, it might have looked a little extreme in the beginning because just blocking in the muscles just makes it look like it's on steroids. But if you block in the muscles in that way, that makes it a lot easier for you to figure out, okay, where do I want my skin or my fat deposits to be? Because then you've got like this clear outline of everything, you can just start to cover it up. So knowing your anatomy and also your creature anatomy here is definitely going to come in handy.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to learn how to sculpt these kind of characters, like I would recommend you start with human anatomy, human figure sculpting, because everything is kind of based on that. Like it's not just the anatomy, but it's also like a theory of sculpting, getting good clean shapes. If you can make good clean shapes for a human, you can make good clean shapes for an animal. It's just that stuff is slightly offset. You know, you have slightly different muscles here and there, different proportions, but particularly if you were to look at the skeleton of a human versus like even an elephant or horse, you know, it's
basically the same.
Yeah, it's basically the same. Some muscle or some bones are fused together. Maybe all the toes or fingers are fused into one giant bone, but it's essentially the exact same thing.
Like for a horse doesn't need pecs, you know, so they're quite useless there.
But the giant triceps.
Exactly. Whereas for people, we're really reliant on the pecs. The triceps are a lot smaller.
Yeah.
So it's just about, you know, figuring out, okay, what's the difference there. So once you, I'm not going to say master human anatomy, but get quite comfortable with human anatomy, then the creature or animal anatomy becomes a lot more sort of second nature.
Yeah, because then you're not trying to solve sculpting. Then you're trying to solve a specific problem, which is this creature here has some very specific anatomy. But all the sculpting is kind of now gone into your subconscious. Like when I'm sculpting this, I'm not thinking, oh, what's my sculpting technique? It just means you can now focus purely on the specifics of this sculpt.
Now this part here, inside of the mouth kind of thing where it transitions to snake, alligator stuff. Oh,
that's tricky.
I really dislike that area just because it's kind of tricky to get right.
Yeah.
Because there's upper jaw, lower jaw, the sort of membrane in between. Yeah, you have that for lions as well. Like a lot of these feline animals, they have that sort of membrane in there as well. It's quite tricky to get right sometimes.
I really love that membrane. And that was one thing we added for the sculpt. In the beginning, you can tell there wasn't anything there. And in order to make it look more realistic, we just added this nice membrane. And that comes from observation. That is 1-to-1 from a crocodile.
Such a badass animal.
It really is. Yeah, like it's just one evolution. It's been here for, unchanged for 70 million years, basically.
Yeah, they've nailed that.
Yeah. One thing to keep in mind as well, in general, when you're sculpting, is you really want your teeth to be separate subtools. You don't want your teeth to be merged or like just to protrude from the gums. You really want them to be separate. Do
yourself a favor.
Yeah.
It's gonna make sculpting a lot easier. Yeah. It's the same thing with the gums, really. It's it obviously depends on the character, but those areas that are really close together that pop out like that, you can help yourself a lot by separating that into separate subtools.
Yeah, if you're into pain, then I would recommend merging the gums. But like merging the gums with the body is just so painful. You gotta go. Then you gotta do it properly as well, and it just becomes such a mess.
Yeah.
Just going over every single claw or tooth as well now, every single horn, because if you have a sculpt which has a lot of variation, and then you have a really smooth claws like this, or really smooth horns, then it's just gonna look a bit weird.
Yeah, and what you're noticing here is that it's not like a crazy level of detail that's getting put into the horns and the spikes. It's just a little bit. Yeah. It's just to break up the form slightly. So the level of detail sort of matches the face more closely.
Yeah, it really is just like sculpting some very, very simple things here.
Yeah.
But also when doing this, I'm looking at reference as well. Like I'm looking at a goat horn when doing this. This is not just like, we're just gonna sculpt a dragon. Before sculpting this dragon, I spent around 20 minutes just finding references.
Yeah.
And just trying to evaluate the design, because there's no point in you guys looking at a ZBrush just rotating for like 20 minutes. So you're just pre-digesting some stuff there. Yeah, so when doing these kind of sculptures, there is definitely some stuff that just pops out right away. But then there are also things you just gotta evaluate it. It just takes time. You have to look over it and just like, maybe sculpt a little bit first. I did like a 20-minute sculpting pass just a few days ago as well, just trying out a little sculpting on it, just to make sure it would work.
You see now there's quite a bit of improvement that's been done. I mean, a lot of it is really, the work had already been done before. Yeah. It's just kind of filling in the blanks. Because like the base was solid. Yeah. It was just like it just needed a little bit of a nudge.
Yeah, now we come here and take all the credit for it. Yeah, no, the model was pretty decent. Just some slight underlying things. Yeah, just comparing it before and after. It just looks like it's a bit stronger now.
Yeah.
And then we're going to look into a little teaser for our upcoming product. This is called the FlippedNormals Skin Kit, originally. Original name here.
It's a kit in ZBrush made for skin.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a lot of predefined skin we've already done. So if you need to just block out some skin very quickly, we've already sculpted a bunch of these by hand. So if you need to get this leathery skin on top, you really shouldn't sculpt this. This is like alpha work. They're just really high quality alphas. But unlike some of the other ones which are out there, which are like 15 years old or something, these are all
most of them.
Like most of them. These are all sculpted properly. So you don't need like 200 alphas. You really just need a few of them.
Yeah.
So we are definitely going to be talking more about this kit in the future when it's properly ready. But it's essentially something made where you can take any kind of creature, any kind of character, and just really improve it.
The nice thing about these alphas is that they're pretty, pretty easy to use. It's not like crazy maps for the most realistic high-end VFX or anything. But we think that this is probably going to be a little more accessible to people.
Yeah, exactly. They're not gonna, they're not based on scans of crazy reptilians we've hunted in the Amazon forest. They're made for sculptors.
Yeah. And it's just a nice way to really add a lot of detail to your sculpts. It's not that we've ever really been against using alphas, but we haven't really shown off a lot of alpha stuff in the past. That's just because we're so focused on trying to get some of the mid-frequency detail down first. Just because if you have good mid-frequency detail, then an alpha just enhances that. If you don't, then it's kind of like it's a bit of a waste to use alphas before your mid-frequency is really there.
Yeah, exactly. And after we've done this process as well, there's definitely like some sculpting on top which has to be done, because this is still missing some mid-frequency. But you can always do an initial pass of alphas, and then just to try it out, and then you can do a sculpting pass on top of that.
The nice thing about trying out alphas like this, not necessarily ours, but just alphas in general, is that it gives you a base where you could then start to detail from. Like here, you could go in and then you could start adding some irregularity, like for this kind of scaly skin, then go in with the clay buildup and sculpt a little bit of that like this, just to add a little bit more variation to it.
Exactly. This is of course also going to be available for, like, these aren't ZBrush maps. They are really good in ZBrush, but they're also going to be working perfectly well in Mari and Substance Painter as well.
It's kind of the same approach that we would do if we had like super high-res maps where you texture it in Mari and get maybe like a bump map or something into ZBrush and then sculpt the underlying texture there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they can totally be used for fully high-end production. I used a very similar technique for Pacific Rim, and that was used in the final movie. But it also means you can concept as well. You don't like, if you're going to use it in Paint or Mari, you need proper UVs and topology and all that jazz. Well, this here is obviously a concept sculpt. I really like this stage of detailing where you have like a pass of alphas, and it's not hard anymore. Now it's just go over and refine everything, where you can just really amp up the skin which has been plastered down. Because that's really audiobook podcast land for me. Everything before this is really hard, because then you have to think about how does everything connect up. You got to think about design, but now it's more the labor part of it.
Yeah, and you can see like sort of the danger of going too crazy with alphas is that it tends to wash out a lot of your underlying detail if it's not solid enough.
Yeah, exactly.
And here it's just about, like Henning says, it is a concept sculpt, and if we had more time, we'd obviously go in and refine the mid-frequency detail more. But you can always go in and then like boost it a little bit afterwards to create some more contrast.
And this one here would also be good enough to show a client, because it just has to read a certain kind of skin. Because let's say you were to do this for film or game or whatever, and you've done the wrinkles are perfect, all the skin is perfect, and he going like, yeah, that's cool, but can I have like scaly skin instead of this is a dragon? Clearly, it has snake skin, and you're like, oh man, that was a waste.
Yeah.
So doing like a work in progress pass like this can actually be really good, because now we can get feedback on it.
One thing I also like to do here is if I'm using alphas like this, is obviously have it on a separate layer and then store a morph target, because then you can always plaster it with alphas, and then in some areas maybe you want the skin to vary a little bit. You go in with your morph brush and then you just sort of erase it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really powerful way. The cool thing is also by doing exactly that, by doing it on a layer, you can now extract only that information. You can make a displacement map with only what you sculpted. Yeah. So it's incredibly clean and nice. Because if you were to extract a displacement map of all of this, you would get like the clavicle, the scapula, all this kind of stuff into it, when in reality you only wanted the super high frequency. That was always a problem in production when an asset went between like 4 artists, and some dude had hit merge all layers or bake all layers, and you're like, oh man, my world is now in pain.
Just a quick tip right here at the end. You can see we're using the standard brush, and the nice thing about the standard brush is that you can actually go over the surface and it'll preserve your details. Whereas if you go over it with the clay buildup brush, it'll just erase everything that's underneath.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm actually using the clay buildup brush to do exactly that, because I didn't store a morph target. So I'm kind of using it to smooth some stuff out here. Very last thing is just sculpting a little crappy eye for it, just giving some personality to it. So, I mean, yeah, that's essentially the whole thing. Thank you so much for watching here. And if you have more suggestions of different videos to do in the future, we are more than happy to hear that. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the little notification button as well to get notifications on when we have new videos out.